Fears of war follow a flare-up on the border between Israel and Lebanon. After neighbors and bitter rivals trade fire, both sides say they're ready for more. I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is Hezbollah's new phase with Israel. September kicked off with the Israeli army and Lebanese Shia group Hezbollah exchanging the most serious cross-border fire in more than a decade. Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah declared the standoff had entered a new phase where his group would target all Israeli drones that entered Lebanese airspace. After an uneasy week of calm, that threat was fulfilled on Monday morning, with Hezbollah announcing it had shot down a drone. Israel says it just fell. At a time of soaring tension between Iran's friends and foes, is there really an appetite for regional war? And if not, is there a chance both sides could stumble into it regardless? Haider Abbasi reports.
The fields of Lebanon are burning. They were set alight by shells fired by its neighbor, Israel. Crops were destroyed, but no one was killed. Israel says it was responding to anti-tank missiles that Hezbollah had launched into its territory. The Lebanese group fought a war with Israel in 2006. This is the recent funeral for two Hezbollah militants. Israel admitted to killing the men while they were in Syria. It says they were planning to launch drone strikes into Israel. Hezbollah's leader says Israel's attacks have opened a new phase in hostilities.
The message is clear. If you attack us, then your whole border, soldiers, and settlements deep inside your country will be at risk of an attack and response.
The cross-border strikes were the climax of a week of tensions. It's since been followed by an uneasy calm. But could these two sides inadvertently drag the region into war? Haider Abbasi, The Newsmakers.
Well, Hezbollah's place in Lebanon is contentious. On the one hand, they've been elected to parliament and are a legitimate part of the opposition coalition. On the other, they're accused of acting outside of the law. Prime Minister Saad al-Hariri told CNBC Hezbollah poses a problem for the whole region, and neither he nor Lebanon are to blame for their actions. So, to discuss this, let's go to our panel in Beirut. Basem Shabb is a former MP with Saad Hariri's Future Movement Bloc. Jamal Ghosn is a former managing editor of Akhbar newspaper. And Kamel Wazne is the director of American Strategic Studies in Beirut. Good to have you all on the program. Basem Shabb, when Saad Hariri is saying Hezbollah is not a Lebanese problem, it's a regional problem, that I'm not to blame, Lebanon's not to blame, Hezbollah is to blame. When he's saying this, he's emphasizing that distinction between his government and the group that's fighting with Israel right now. But isn't he also admitting that Hezbollah is more powerful than the state now because he can't do anything about it?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has put things in a proper perspective. Hezbollah is a Lebanese political party, but Hezbollah is well supported and financed by Iran, and is organically tied to Iran. And its strength is not only in Lebanon, but outside Lebanon. So the Prime Minister is correct in technically saying that this dimension of Hezbollah is not a Lebanese dimension, and it's a regional issue. And Lebanon now cannot curb the influence of Hezbollah locally when other regional powers, the United States and others, have seen the power of Iran rise in the region over decades. So I think he's right in that, but he's also trying to say that Hezbollah is not Lebanon, and any attempts to punish Hezbollah, either legally, financially, or otherwise, should not target the Lebanese state.
Right.
We've heard the Israelis say that now it's Hezbollah is Lebanon and Lebanon is Hezbollah, and everything in Lebanon now is fair game for us. I think the Prime Minister was trying to put things in a perspective.
And as we saw in the past, in 2006, the entire state, whether the Lebanese people wanted it or not, they were involved in a war. And among those more than 1,000 people who died, they weren't wearing Hezbollah badges, right? Jamal Ghosn, are we at a point now where we're seeing Hezbollah acting solely, primarily on behalf of the Iranians when they're fighting with the Israelis, rather than as Lebanese resistance?
This has never been the case. There's always been a Lebanese resistance. They draw their strength from the young Lebanese men and women who have joined the resistance since '82 and have put their lives on the line fighting against the Israeli occupation and pushing the Israelis out. But that's, there are always within the Lebanese scene some Israeli aggression enablers who like to distance themselves from the resistance against Israel and hope maybe they adhere to the mantra that my enemy's enemy is a friend, but that's always been the case. It was the case in '82 when Israel invaded Lebanon. It was the case in 2006 when Israel launched massive aggression against Lebanon. It's the case today. The positive thing in all of that is that these Israeli enablers or enablers of Israeli aggression have weakened over the years, and at the same time the resistance has grown stronger.
I'm going to go to Basem in a moment.
Certainly, we stand much better.
Certainly, I'm going to go to Basem in a moment and get him to respond to whether he's an Israeli enabler or not. But I want to ask Kamel Wazne, we have Jamal Ghosn downplaying the connection between Hezbollah and Tehran here, saying this is Lebanese resistance to Israeli aggression, to Israeli occupation. Is he right, or is he ignoring the elephant in the room, which is Tehran?
Well, obviously, the movement started in '82 and was supported by the Iranian, and Hezbollah, actually, he doesn't deny that fact that the Iranian support him and they train him. And actually, they've been acting as a deterrent force against the Israeli. In the end, in '82, Israel came and invaded Lebanon, and as a result, the resistance movement has established with the blessing of the late Ayatollah Khomeini. So they came, the Revolutionary Guard came to Lebanon, to Bekaa Valley, and start training the Hezbollah fighter. This is something Hezbollah always speak clearly about it. But as the Israeli, they say the United States support them militarily and they financially, and they support in every aspect at the international arena. Today, Iran stand by the Hezbollah, by the Lebanese in their deterrence fight against the Israeli. Before '82 and after '82 up to 2000, Israel always attacked Lebanon and violated the sovereignty of the country. The fact Hezbollah cannot really stand by itself on this confrontation, because this confrontation, it's a regional confrontation, has nothing to be shy about that, because when you have the West standing with Israel in every aspect, against Lebanon and against the right of the Palestinian, there is nothing wrong to have a regional support to support Lebanon against any aggression. And in this way, we are preserving the peace and stability. Nobody wanted a war.
As you say,
nobody is seeking a war. Everybody want to avoid a war, and this is where it is right now.
Okay, and that's what we're trying to figure out, if this is going to escalate. And to the regional point, the Israelis saying that rockets were fired from within Syrian territory by an Iranian proxy at the same time as all of this flaring up. So undoubtedly this is regional. Basem Shabb, are you an Israeli aggression enabler, if I got that correct, by opposing Hezbollah, which is what we heard from Jamal?
No. I assume that comment was not aimed at me, and I will not delve into that discussion. The Lebanese government, in its policy manifesto, has declared that the resistance is legitimate, and they take part of the government. So this accusation, for sure, is not aimed at me. But the question is now, the issue is the issue of sovereignty. And the issue is of the economic situation that Lebanon is facing. and which is the primary threat now in Lebanon. It's the economic situation. And the last thing that Lebanon needs now is a war. And so this escalation that happened was not because the Lebanese government wanted to escalate. And I think in many ways even Hezbollah does not want to escalate. They know that they're part of the government and they don't want to be seen as flaring something that leads to a dismal outcome. But the framework is that now Lebanon is caught in a regional dimension.
Right.
And this Israeli-Hezbollah confrontation should really be seen in its proper perspective.
Right.
A maximum pressure on Iran by proxy. And some of that includes financial sanctions against Hezbollah. And some of that includes Israeli attacks against Hezbollah and Iranian forces, proxy forces in Syria and Iraq.
Yep.
This is the proper perspective to
Certainly,
look into
and
the
that's
current
what
situation.
And that's what we're trying to do as Lebanon is entangled.
But at this point,
right?
Yeah.
Certainly, as Lebanon's entangled in this regional dilemma, it's the
That's
cheese
right.
in the regional kanafa right here, right? Jamal Ghosn, Bahrain's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Khalid bin Ahmed Al Khalifa, tweeting that the aggression of one state against another is prohibited by international law. For a state to stand by as spectator as a battle escalates along its borders and endangers its people is major complacency in the responsibility of that state. He's not directly naming Lebanon, not directly naming Hezbollah, not directly naming Iran, but you know what he's saying. That's the view from a lot of the Gulf countries as well. Are they wrong?
That is not, I won't say if they're wrong or right, that's not new. Just like, of course, I wasn't pointing fingers at Mr. Shabb, but there were many Lebanese officials in 2006 whose names came out in the leaked embassy cables that were leaked through WikiLeaks. And let me take a quick moment to just salute Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, who are being held hostage by the UK and the US. But yes, there were upper echelon Lebanese officials that were in cahoots with Israel in 2006, and that's documented on paper. The same with the Arab countries, whether Bahrain or Saudi Arabia or other of these nations were secretly pro the 2006 aggression against Lebanon. And now they're more out in the open, but that did not change anything on the ground. They were all, that position was always theirs. They were enabling the Israeli aggression on Lebanon, and they continue to be in the same camp today.
Kamel Wazne, from the Israeli perspective, if you had to put yourself into their shoes, if Hezbollah is firing anti-tank missiles and rockets across the border and trying to hit them, what do they do? Do they just sit back?
Well, obviously, no, everybody is preserving the 1701. Basically, the Israeli came into the suburb of Beirut and they attack civilian areas, and thank God nobody is hurt. Nobody is actually violating the Israeli airspace. Israel is violating Lebanese airspace. The question, if Israel violate the sovereignty of Lebanon, what we should do, what the international should be doing right now. Nobody is violating Israel airspace. Nobody is shelling bomb at Israel with no reason. The fact that Israel violated that major United Nations resolution in 2006, this is the question we have to address. We have been violated hundreds of times by the Israeli. So we have the right to defend ourselves, and we have the right to keep deterrence. This force is not to be used for attacking another country. This force is to be actually to preserve and to prevent a war. It's a deterrence. As I said, no one wanted to have a war. War is not a picnic, but in the end, if Israeli want to change the rule of the game, then the resistance cannot sit quietly about that, and it has to take a measure, a measured measure, and that's what happened. So war will not break between Lebanon and Israel. The question, it's time for the Israelis stop violating the interest of the Lebanese, and this way we will be better off.
Okay, Basem, Jamal and Kamel, Unfortunately, I've got to move on. It's been great to get your perspectives from Beirut. Looking forward to having you back on the program sometime soon. That's the view from inside Lebanon. But what about south of the border? Israel goes to the polls next week, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be fighting for his political life. Some have cynically questioned the timing of these confrontations, wondering whether the government showing force might be good for votes. But if not by airstrikes, then how should Israel handle Hezbollah? That debate in just a moment, but first, here's Haider Abbasi again.
Over a few days last month, airstrikes targeted militant groups in Lebanon, Syria and Iraq. They blamed Israel for the attacks. Many worry these airstrikes could provoke a war, but it seems Israel's target may not be Hezbollah, but Iran.
Iran is working on a broad front to carry out murderous terrorist attacks against the state of Israel. Israel will continue to defend its security however that may be necessary. I call on the international community to act immediately so that Iran halts these attacks.
All of the militias Israel has targeted are supported by Tehran. Some analysts say Israel is trying to contain Iran's influence by attacking its proxies. And Israel will hold parliamentary elections next week. The attacks on Iranian-backed militias are seen by some as a show of strength by Netanyahu as he faces corruption charges. So are more Israeli strikes against Iran's proxies likely, or were the attacks just part of Netanyahu's election strategy?
Well, to help answer that, we're joined from Moscow by Danny Ayalon, Israel's former deputy foreign minister and once the ambassador to the United States. And in Tel Aviv, we have Haaretz journalist Gideon Levy. Good to have you both on the program. Gideon, it seems as if both Hezbollah and Israel, with both sides here fighting with one arm tied behind their backs, but still wanting the other to know that they're there and they can cause damage. Why is Prime Minister Netanyahu fighting this fight right now?
First of all, it's not a new fight. What is new now and has to do with the elections is the fact that Israel stands behind it and admits part of those operations. It's quite a new strategy taken by Mr. Netanyahu, rightly or not, legitimate or not, that Israel has the right to put a veto on some kind of arms, game-changing arms in the whole region. And not only non-conventional arms, but from now on also conventional arms. Israel wants to demilitarize almost the whole Middle East from certain arms, certain weapons, and everyone can ask, does Israel has the right to do so? Does it have the power? Is it clever to do so? But that's the strategy. What is new right now is that Israel went one step further and decides to give publication to those attacks, and this has to do already with the elections.
Right. Okay. So it's interesting, and we know that from the words of the government themselves, they're saying they're fighting Hezbollah as Hezbollah, but they're also fighting Hezbollah as an extension of Iran, which is part of a broader regional fight. Danny Ayalon, there's a cynical view here. They're saying it's convenient, it's a great opportunity to distract the public from Netanyahu's corruption scandals at home, from trouble with the law, his inability to form a new government, elections just a week from now. Hey, let's have a little skirmish with Hezbollah. Is that why he's wagging this dog?
No, I don't think so. I may agree with Gideon Levy in Jerusalem that maybe the announcements for taking responsibility in some cases may have to be looked at the backdrop of the elections. But on the face of it, the facts are that the aggression is all coming from Iran. Iran actually is violating 1701, that is by the arming the Hezbollah. Hezbollah, as your guest mentioned in Beirut, is an organ of Iran. It's not serving Lebanese interests. Basically, Lebanese interest called for, if you look at the Taif agreement in 1992, of actually disarming all militias, and indeed all militias in Lebanon. But Hezbollah were disarmed. And there is 1701 after the Lebanon War in 2006, which forbids Hezbollah to come to the border with Israel, but give it this responsibility to the Lebanese army. But this is not the case. The Lebanese army is nowhere to be seen. Hezbollah is taken over. Just a few months ago, we have discovered underground tunnels going across the border from Lebanon, dug by Hezbollah, to our settlements. So this aggression has been going on for a long time. By the way, what we see now is the manifestation of 4 decades of aggression by the Ayatollahs in Iran. Actually, since 79. Until 79, Israel-Iran relations were good. Also, Iranian relations with the entire Western world. But once the Ayatollahs performed their coup, and this radical Islamic Ayatollahs took over, then they say one thing, which is they want to erase Israel off the map. We take it seriously.
Right.
The second thing is they do take measures in order to do that, through Hezbollah, through Hamas, now through Syria and Iraq. And what we do is just defending ourselves, and we will continue to do that. We will not volunteer to just roll over and die.
Right, Hassan Nasrallah saying, remember September the 1st, 2019 as the beginning of a new phase, and later adding, I tell the Israelis we no longer have red lines. Fascinating from him. We'll have to see how serious he is. Gideon Levy, to the point of Israel now publicizing this, I was looking at, it was fascinating, you know, there were claims that they were faking evacuations and faking injuries of soldiers to get Hezbollah to stop firing rockets. I went to check what the defense minister said about it, and then I realized, of course, Netanyahu is also the defense minister, Salimi. We're in this strange and fascinating phase of Israeli politics right now, where a lot of power is concentrated in this one man. Is he willing, Gideon, do you think, is he willing to risk a huge war? Because we know that if one Israeli soldier dies, or more than one, Israel can be sucked into a big war like we saw in 2006. Is he willing to do that?
By all means not, Imran.
I don't think Netanyahu
Danny, that's for
war.
Gideon. Sorry. Go ahead, Gideon.
By all means not, Imran.
Is it my time?
No, I'm talking now. And for the last 13 years, you can criticize Netanyahu for so many things. But one thing must be said in favor of him. This man is very, very careful about launching a war, much more than the Israeli leftists. By the way, it's very similar to Donald Trump. Look at Donald Trump. We can criticize Donald Trump. We should criticize Donald Trump. But Donald Trump is much more careful about using armies rather than, for example, the man of peace, Barack Obama. So I think Netanyahu is playing it very, very carefully. He knows very well that a war will not serve neither him nor Israel. And, you know, after 13 years launching only one war, this is quite exceptional in Israeli politics, unfortunately.
Right. Danny Ayalon, is Gideon right that the lefties are more hawkish than the right-wingers and Netanyahu is actually more careful than we think? And perhaps it's because Hezbollah shouldn't be underestimated. This is different to 2006. They're tougher, they're battle-weary. They've been fighting in Syria for the past 7 years or so. So is Benjamin Netanyahu cognizant of this, and that's why he doesn't want to go all in?
Well, as a rule of thumb, it is true that left-wing government feels much more the pressure from the public to be tough or to be seen tough on security. So this really gives a right-wing government, Netanyahu, for instance, much more leverage and also space for maneuver, much more latitude. However, if you look at the facts, I don't think that Netanyahu wants war. Israel doesn't need a war, but of course there is the risk of miscalculation, and the miscalculation could be on the Iranian side by them continuing to push missiles and equipment that would make these missiles more accurate and dangerous over to Hezbollah, by trying to dig in and entrench in Syria, by this opening a second front against Israel from the Syrian Golan, or take it even deeper into the Shiite region in Iraq. So basically what Iran is trying to do is take over the entire Middle East, and they are undermining the Yemens, Lebanon, Iraq, of course, Syria. And if you have to look at one thing, if in this very rare occasion, Israel and all the Sunni Arab countries are on the same page, Saudi, Gulf countries, Egypt, and Jordan, we are all together on the one side, looking at the Ayatollahs in the same way. So something must be right about it. And this is why it is so important for the international community to put the pressure down on Iran and continue to do that.
We're out of time. I got to jump in here, but it's been a pleasure having you on the program, as well as you, Gideon. I hope to have you back on the show sometime soon. Well, that's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. You can check out more of our stories on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Do remember to like, follow, and subscribe. Until tomorrow, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.